Paul Gauguin. Gauguin was born in Paris to Clovis Gauguin and Aline Chazal on June 7, 1848. In 1850, Clovis Gauguin departed for Peru with his wife Aline and young children in hopes of continuing his journalistic career. He died of a heart attack en route, and Aline arrived in Peru a widow with 18-month-old Paul and his 2.5-year-old sister, Marie. Gauguin's mother was welcomed by her paternal granduncle, whose son-in-law would shortly assume the presidency of Peru. To the age of 6, Paul enjoyed a privileged upbringing, attended by nursemaids and servants. He retained a vivid memory of that period of his childhood, which installed indelible impressions of Peru that haunted him the rest of his life. Gauguin's idyllic childhood ended abruptly when his family mentors fell from political power during Peruvian civil conflicts in 1854. Aline returned to France with her children, leaving Paul with his paternal grandfather, Guillaume Gauguin, in Orléans, France. In 1871, Gauguin returned to Paris, where he secured a job as a stockbroker. A close family friend, Gustave Rosa, got him a job at the Paris Bourse, France's stock market. Gauguin was 23. He became a successful Parisian businessman and remained one for the next 11 years. In 1879, he was earning 30,000 francs a year, about 145,000 in today's dollars, as a stockbroker, and as much again in his dealings in the art market. In 1873, he married a Danish woman, Mette Sophie Gauguin, and over the next 10 years they had 5 children. His middle-class family and marriage fell apart after 11 years, and Gauguin was driven to paint full-time. He returned to Paris in 1885 after his wife and her family asked him to leave because he had renounced the values they shared. Gauguin initially found it difficult to re-enter the art world in Paris and spent his first winter back in real poverty, obliged to take a series of menial jobs. During this first year, Gauguin produced very little art. Gauguin spent the summer of 1886 in the artist colony of Pontivin in Brittany. He was attracted in the first place because it was cheap to live there. However, he found himself an unexpected success with the young art students who flocked there in the summer. His naturally pugilistic temperament, he was both an accomplished boxer and fencer, was no impediment in the socially relaxed seaside resort. He was remembered during that period as much for his outlandish appearance as for his art. In 1887, after having visited Panama, Gauguin spent the time from June to November near Saint-Pierre in the Caribbean island of Martinique, accompanied by his friend the artist Charles Laval. He arrived in Martinique by way of Panama, where he found himself broke and without a job. At the time, France had a policy of repatriation, where if a citizen became broke or stranded on a French colony, the state would pay for the boat ride back. Upon leaving Panama, protected by the repatriation policy, Gauguin and Laval decided to get off the boat at Martinique. Gauguin finished 11 known paintings during his stay in Martinique, many of which seemed to be derived from his hut. Even though his time on the island was short, it surely was influential. Rural and indigenous populations remained a popular subject in Gauguin's work after he left the island. Gauguin's Martinique paintings were exhibited at his color merchant Arsène Poitier's gallery, where they were seen and admired by Vincent van Gogh and his art dealer brother, Theo van Gogh, whose firm Goupil & C had dealings with Poitiers. Theo purchased 3 of Gauguin's paintings for 900 francs and arranged to have them hung at Goupil's, thus introducing Gauguin to wealthy clients. At the same time, Vincent and Gauguin became close friends and they corresponded together on art, a correspondence that was instrumental in Gauguin formulating his philosophy of art. Gauguin's relationship with Vincent proved fraught. In 1888, at Theo's instigation, Gauguin and Vincent spent 9 weeks painting together at Vincent's yellow house in Arles in the south of France. Their relationship deteriorated and eventually Gauguin decided to leave. On the evening of December 23, 1888, Van Gogh confronted Gauguin with a straight razor. Later that same evening, Van Gogh cut off his own left ear. He wrapped the severed tissue in newspaper and handed it to a woman who worked at the brothel that both Gauguin and Van Gogh had visited, and asked her to keep this object carefully in remembrance of me. Van Gogh was hospitalized the following day, and Gauguin left Arles. They never saw each other again, but they continued to correspond, and in 1890 Gauguin went so far as to propose they form an artist studio in Antwerp, Belgium. An 1889 sculptural self-portrait, jug in the form of a head, appears to reference Gauguin's dramatic relationship with Van Gogh. Gauguin later claimed to have been instrumental in influencing Van Gogh's development as a painter at Arles. While Van Gogh did briefly experiment with Gauguin's theory of painting from the imagination in paintings such as Memory in the Garden at Etten, it did not suit him, and he quickly returned to painting from nature. After visiting his wife and children in Copenhagen for what turned out to be the last time, Gauguin set sail for Tahiti on April 1, 1891, promising to return a rich man and to make a fresh start. His avowed intent was to escape European civilization and everything that is artificial and conventional. He decided to set up his studio some 45 kilometers from the capital, Papeete, installing himself in a native-style bamboo hut. Here he executed paintings depicting Tahitian life such as By the Sea and Ave Maria, the latter to become his most prized Tahitian painting. Many of his finest paintings date from this period. His first portrait of a Tahitian model is thought to be Woman with a Flower. The painting is notable for the care with which it delineates Polynesian features. By the summer of 1892, this painting was being displayed at Goupil's gallery in Paris. In all, Gauguin sent 9 of his paintings to Paris. These were eventually exhibited at Copenhagen in the joint exhibition with the late Vincent van Gogh. Gauguin married a 13-year-old Tahitian girl named Taha Amana. She was the subject of several of Gauguin's paintings, including Marahi Metua no Taha Amana, currently in the Art Institute of Chicago, and the celebrated Spirit of the Dead Watching, as well as notable woodcarving Tahura, now in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. In August 1893, Gauguin returned to France, where he continued to execute paintings on Tahitian subjects. By mid-1895, attempts to raise funds for Gauguin's return to Tahiti had failed, and he began accepting charity from friends. In June 1895, Eugene Carrière arranged a cheap passage back to Tahiti, and Gauguin never saw Europe again. Gauguin's health began to deteriorate, involving leg pain and heart palpitations and general debility. The pain in his injured ankle grew insupportable. By September, the pain was so extreme that he resorted to morphine injections. However, he was sufficiently concerned by the habit he was developing to turn his syringe set over to a neighbor, relying instead on laudanum. His sight was also beginning to fail him, as attested by the spectacles he wears in his last known self-portrait. This was actually a portrait commenced by his friend Kai Dong, that he completed himself, thus accounting for its uncharacteristic style. It shows a man tired and aged, yet not entirely defeated. At the beginning of 1903, Gauguin engaged in a campaign designed to expose the incompetence of the island's gendarmes, the police, in particular Officer Claverie. At the beginning of February, Gauguin wrote to the administrator, Francois Piquenot, alleging corruption by one of Claverie's subordinates. Piquenot investigated the allegations but could not substantiate them. Claverie responded by filing a charge of libeling a gendarme against Gauguin, who was subsequently fined 500 francs and sentenced to 3 months' imprisonment by the local magistrate. Gauguin immediately filed an appeal in Papeete, the capital, and set about raising funds to travel to the capital to hear his appeal. At this time, Gauguin was very weak and in great pain, and resorted once again to using morphine. He died suddenly on the morning of May 8, 1903.